Hello friend, today we are going to take a look at auto tagging customers based on order channel. We want to tag people based on the sales channel from which or in which, on which, by which they actually place their order. So let's start with that. For this task, we're going to have to think about two scenarios. First of all, what happens when an order is actually created or paid? And then secondly, what happens when the merchant wants to backfill an order or backfill data? So scanning through historical order records to see which customers have purchased via which channel. So eventually we're going to have to do something like this to allow people to run the task manually. But for the moment, we're just going to think about what happens when an order is paid. So when an order is paid, we need to figure out what channel it arrived from. And the sample data that Mechanic's giving us for this particular event topic looks like this, and we could trawl through this to see what data is right. And I know just from dealing with this kind of thing before that we could take a look at app ID. That would require us to identify which internal app ID Shopify uses to power the online store and the buy button, because these are both apps internally. But I think the way that I want to go about this, unless there's something built into the webhook data, it doesn't look like there is. What I want to do here actually is change this to create, first of all, save it, add some more permissions, update. Okay, cool. What I actually want to do is place an order via both of these channels. I might have to add a different channel than buy button to make this work, but let's start with this. Catalog, short sleeve t-shirt. Gonna buy it now. Gonna wait for a second. Continue payment. I wonder how picky the validation is going to be for this. Order is free. Great. So we're going to hit pay now. Come back on over here. We're going to see a webhook from Mechanic, or triggered by Shopify, but we're going to receive it in Mechanic over here. Oh, you know what? There's no data over here. So we're not seeing anything here because there are no actions, no preview actions. I could have done something like this, a simple outgo action, which would have outputted this. I didn't have anything. That's fine. So instead of all of that, what I'm going to do is uncheck this box right here, open up our event that did nothing, and no I haven't saved changes. That's fine. Okay, cool. So this is the data that I'm actually interested in. This is all of the information pertaining to this order that just came in. So we're going to grab this order ID, and for the purposes of exploration, we're going to open up the admin GraphQL interface, or graphical interface is how it's actually pronounced. We're going to inspect the data that's available for this particular order. I hit Command Enter to have this thing pre-filled, by the way. And I believe channel use publication instead. Okay, cool. This is worth noting. Shopify still communicates these to merchants as sales channels, but under the hood they prefer the term publication. So publication. I hit Control Space to see what's available to me here, and we've got a bunch of information, including, for example, the app ID. If I look at this order information and look for the app ID field right here, 580111, that corresponds directly with this value right here, because as I said, the online store is just another app. This is fun. I didn't actually notice that was there before. Cool. But I'm not actually interested in that. I'm interested in the publication name, because that is the thing that merchants will be most familiar with. Online store. Because when we are over in our task management over here, the thing that I'll want to surface to a merchant is something like this. Sales, channel, name, and tag. Keyval required. This won't make any sense over here, but what we have as a generated set of config is a sales channel name and tag, and these should actually be pluralized, because on one side we're going to want to put things like online store, and on the other side we're going to put things like tags, online store. It's really as simple as that. And I'm not actually going to bother with trying to create orders for different sales channels because I know the data is going to be available via this method, and the publication name is going to be available right here. I have all the information that I need. So let's close this. Let's come back over here. So what I'm going to do is say that we want to execute this query for every order that comes in. Remember, right now we're only paying attention to orders as they are created. So query for order, the order ID is going to come from the order object itself. So order.admin GraphQL API ID. And I know that I have an order object because, think about that in a second. I know that I have an order object because we're responding to an order event. And every event that comes from Shopify has a liquid object available that is based on the order, like this noun that exists right here. So we've got this thing right here. We have a lexical error because none of this is valid JSON yet. We'll get to that in a second. So we have our GraphQL query written right here. We're actually going to execute it by passing it through results, by passing it through the Shopify filter like so. And then for the purposes of our exercise here, I'm going to say action, actually here, log results. That's redundant. We'll just do that. And then we'll comment this out for the moment because I do want that variable, but we don't need it yet. So we have no preview actions just yet because this is not an action, it's just a log entry. But let's save this. Let's grant some access because now we need to do some order information, or now we need to query for order information. View products, that's interesting. Okay. Because we've used the term publication in our task script right here, Mechanic is saying, you care about publications. Sweet. That usually refers to products being published, so we're going to grab permission for products too. That's all right. So now we've got our query. We have it captured in a result. And to actually try this out, let's go back to our event that came in earlier. I'm going to hit the retry button and just reprocess this thing. This is only available because there weren't any actions generated. If there wasn't an action generated, I wouldn't be able to retry it. That's why I chose to use a log statement here instead of an echo action. If I had echoed instead of simply logging, I wouldn't be able to rewrite or reperform this task run right here. So if I maximize this, here's what comes back. We have our data order ID. Here's our order ID. I don't need to query for that. I already know the order ID, but here's importantly the publication name, which is excellent. So I'm going to copy this right here because one of the ways to be responsible with writing a mechanic task is to generate actions for the preview that are based on actually exercising your entire task script. So what I'm going to do here is say that if we're doing an event preview, and remember that during event preview, accessing the API is disallowed. So if we are in event preview, we're going to create our own result variable based on data that looks realistic. So we're going to say capture result.json, and we're reusing the data that we just got back from our log statement. And then we're going to say, cool. So now, if I replace this with an echo action, we'll see up here a chunk of data that looks realistic, but is definitely only based on this stub data that we generated for the preview. And I'm remembering that I don't care about querying for the order ID, just that. So now I've got an online store, and now we can actually think about tagging. So what we can do is say, how should we do this? I suppose what we can do is grab from our help area a little chunk of GraphQL that performs tagging. So let's start here. We're being a little bit naive right now because we haven't started to think about things like what happens if the customer already has this tag. We'll get to that. But for now, order.customer admin GraphQL API ID, and then the tag is going to be whatever tag is appropriate based on the channel name configured here and the channel name retrieved from GraphQL. So let's begin here. Assign tag to add equals, and we'll take this whole thing, and we'll do a lookup based on result.data.order.publication.name. Result.data.order.publication.name. Okay. And for test purposes, I'm going to say, yep, online store. So we've correctly arrived at a tag to add. I'm going to do myself a favor here and make this more versatile though, because right now this only works because online store was here and online store was here. If I change this name, we'll only get a useful value for preview purposes if we happen by coincidence to line up here. Yeah, so instead what we're going to do is, instead of hard coding this piece of stub data, we're going to pull this out of the merchant's configuration. So now if I take a key val value, which translates to a hash, keys on one side, values on the other, if I do .first on that, I receive a tuple, an array of size 2. The first element on it is the key, the last element is the value, 0, 1. So if I do first.first, I'm going to arrive at something that is just this value right here. So now I'm guaranteed that no matter what I type in here, this tag to add is always going to have a value in preview mode because our stub data reflects the configuration. Perfect. So now I've got our tag to add, and strictly speaking, when we're off in production, we may not always have a tag to add. There may be sales channels that the merchant doesn't care about tagging for. So we'll say if tag to add is not blank, then and only then will we generate our mutation. Okay. We're using tag to add, which is online store in this case. That thing updates properly. Fantastic. Order customer admin GraphQL API ID. Great. Now this right here, I want to make sure, let me start over. This value right here always needs to be a GID, global ID, that begins with Shopify/customer. That's because the tag's add mutation doesn't have anything in it that intrinsically refers to customers, and we need to make sure that our preview actions over here always contain enough information so that both the merchant and mechanic can tell what we plan on tagging in this case. I'm saying that because if for some reason our order didn't have a customer, as in this case, we would have a mutation that looks like this, and if I save the task, mechanic won't ask for any additional permissions because it has no idea what kind of thing we want to tag. It has no idea we're talking about customers. So in our case, this happens to work, but only because we have mechanic has knowledge of an event that has this topic that has an actual customer information related to it. So right now this is kind of succeeding by coincidence because this right here is based on that order that I was just created. Mechanic is generating a preview based on the most recent order create event that it saw for my particular store. That's leaving too much up to chance. So instead of this, I'm going to say, and we'll update the GraphQL for this in a second, result.data.order.customer.id. And that means we want to look up the customer for the order and we'll look up their ID, just like so. And if I hop over here and I update this to match, I see that this query works. I receive a customer ID right here. If I come back over here and add this to our stub data, replacing this ID with something that is a little bit more clearly actually test data, then we see over here that our tags add mutation is generated using our stub data. Perfect. We have a task that is proven deterministically to work in preview mode. We are using stub data and everything is looking great so far, honestly. The next thing to add is a case that ensures that the customer is not tagged more than necessary. Right now, we're totally ignoring the case in which the customer already has this tag. So let's query for the customer tags as well. ID tags. We'll look for those two fields. Tags right now returns an empty array, which is just fine for our purposes here. Tags, empty array. For the purposes of testing this thing, let's say that the customer is already tagged ASDF. Remember, this is again only for event preview. So customer's tagged ASDF, so now we need to say if we have a tag to add, but also unless result.data.order.customer.tags contains tag to add, just like that. And now we are making sure that we are only doing this action if there's a tag to add and it's not already on the customer. So tags ASDF, if I were to remove this, our mutation comes back. That's perfect. Now, one way to be kind to yourself when doing mechanic test development is to not silently make decisions, or one way to be kind to yourself is to not opt out silently of performing actions, but instead to leave yourself notes later on. And for example, what I mean by that is the customer already has the tag for this channel skipping. If I leave this in here, I know that in the future, if this task opts out of tagging a customer, and say the merchant wants to know why that happened, all I have to do is take a look at the task result and see, I've already made a note for myself. It's because this customer already had this tag. Fantastic. I'm actually going to be a little bit more verbose with this and say that the tag we wanted to add at this time was the tag to add value. And now we have all the information that we would need in the future to determine that we opted out of action because the customer was already tagged. Let's do a complete job of this and also unnest this stuff and say if the tag to add is blank, okay, and then else if, and then else. Great. Let's also pull out the publication name here so we can log that as well. One underscore there. Okay. Publication name, we're using that here. And then we're logging that value, tag to add. I'll put that here too. Great. So now we have, from starting from the beginning here, a query that pulls down the customer, their ID, in order to perform tagging, the tag itself, the set of tags they already have, the publication name. We have, for event preview, a set of stub result data that exactly resembles information that we'd get back from GraphQL here, with a dummy test customer ID, an empty set of tags, a publication name that mirrors the merchant's configuration. Down here, we've extracted the publication name from the GraphQL result. We're using that to actually look up the tag that we want to add. And now down here, we're saying, all right, if the tag to add is blank, great. We'll log a message that our future selves know what's happened at that time. Otherwise, if the customer was already tagged with this thing, we'll log a different message. And we'll be logging as well the publication name and the tag that we wanted to add at that time. And if neither of those cases are true, then we are doing a mutation in which we tag the customer using their ID with a tag to add. Phenomenal. So let's close this. Let's save it. Let's grant some access because now at this time we're going to be writing customers, and that requires additional permissions to be granted. Close that up. Awesome. I'm going to leave this as is, FSA ASDF. That's obviously not going to do anything for our event from earlier. I'll prove it by hitting retry. Yep. Here's our logged message. No tag found for this channel, skipping. Publication name was online store. Great. We know exactly what happened. This is why I sleep at night sometimes. All right, back to manage this task. If I change this to online store, or add a new record to prove that we can look up things properly, and do this, save. Let's go back to our event that did nothing. Retry. And now we're tagging our customer. Perfect. If I go back to our GraphQL API situation thing over here, if I rerun the query, I'll see that the customer has been tagged online store. And if I were to create a new order, just going to prove it, if I were to create a new order quickly in which, for the same channel, if I were to create a new order using the same customer, back over here, let's uncheck this. Yep, here's our order. Customer already has this tag for the channel, skipping, fantastic. Great, okay, cool. We are 20 minutes in and we've already completed the core requirement for this particular task. When incoming orders come in, tag people according to the channel that they're using. The rest of this is going to involve bulk processing of the orders and customers that already exist, so as to process all the tagging, in order to process all the tagging based on historical data. Now for this, we're going to need two different event subscriptions. First, we need mechanic user trigger in order to take a look at, in order to allow the merchant to actually run this thing. The other thing that we're going to do is subscribe to bulk operation, and that is because for this purpose we are going to use bulk operations. If you haven't used them before, they're excellent. A bulk operation allows you to process a very large amount of data very quickly. I'm actually going to jump over to this section because here, GraphQL with bulk operations, here is where we have a blank, not a blank. Here is where we have a template that I can use to very quickly assemble this thing. Explain this template here. We say if the event topic is the user triggering the event, we put together a string that represents the chunk of GraphQL that we want to ship off to Shopify, and then we actually send it to Shopify using this bulk operation run query mutation, where we provide the query that we actually want to run as a string argument to this mutation. And then later, Shopify comes back, mechanic triggers this event right here, and we're able to process in bulk all the data that came back from that bulk operation. Bulk operations are awesome for bulk data, as you might expect, because you can trivially work with hundreds of thousands, millions of records without having to worry about your mechanic task running forever or taking a bunch of memory or things like that. So let's copy all of this, head over here. And now we need to make some updates. We want to say that all of this is only relevant if the event.topic, and here's where I'm going to do something different than strict equality. Right now, we're going to be executing all this stuff if the current topic contains Shopify's /orders/. That means that in the future, somebody could say, oh, I don't want this to execute when orders created only when it's paid, or only when it's updated, or something like that. This is just slightly more future-proof. Granted, it's one line, easy to change a line, but still, I prefer it this way. So that's this. And then we're going to throw in the template that I copied from the documentation page. Now for bulk operation query, we're going to be doing something quite similar to this, except instead of looking at a specific order, we're going to be looking at all orders, all of them. And I'm going to do it this way for starters, using the first argument, even though in bulk operations you don't need this, but you do if you're actually running a query yourself. So we're going to say all the orders, all the edges, and then we'll take a look at the node, and then we'll execute the stuff. Cool, that's exactly what I want to see. I'm going to write this again from scratch in case you want to see how assembling that kind of query looks like from scratch instead of copying and pasting stuff. So here I would hit Command Enter, and it would show me this and not autocomplete. It's because I already have information here. I would hit Command Enter. Really? There we go. Command Enter, and it pre-fills in for me edges, node, and ID. I know that I want to grab the customer, I want their ID, I want their tags, and then I want the publication name. Perfect. So this is the whole query that I want to actually send off to Shopify. So over here, I'm going to replace this sample thing with the query that we just wrote. I'm going to take off this first argument because it's A, not necessary, B, the bulk operations runtime will actually just straight up ignore it. So we'll click clear that. And then right here, don't need to touch any of this. This is the mutation where we actually send that query off to Shopify. Down here is where we respond to the bulk operation coming back with its data. And for our purposes here, I'm going to just log everything that's in bulk operation.objects. because I'm curious about what that data actually looks like. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to quickly glance over my preview actions. Here we say, cool, we're performing a tags add if an order is created. When user triggers the task, we're performing bulk operation run query. That's perfect. When a bulk operation finishes, we're intentionally not doing any preview actions. We are only logging, and that doesn't show up here. So let's hit run task. Fantastic. Now here what we've got is a notice from Mechanic saying that we have dispatched our bulk operation to Shopify. Under the hood, Mechanic is checking back every minute, so every 60 seconds, to see what the status of this bulk operation actually looks like. If I were to come over here and do a quick query myself, if I was curious, I could take a look at the bulk operation. Oh, there's no current bulk operation, probably because it's already finished. But if I were to drop down here and take a look at this, come on, take a look at, wow, take a look at this bulk operation ID. Node. Still null. Oh, okay, right. Because right now we're using the Shopify graphical app, which is not the same as Mechanic production, and naturally these two apps are not allowed to see each other's bulk operations. So disregard all of that. That's not actually useful. So in a couple of seconds, we will get a piece of information here. Fantastic. Mechanic Shopify bulk operation. If I click through to this, we see that we're waiting for this thing to come back. In the meantime, our object count is 4, probably because we have 3 orders and 1 customer. That's just a guess. We have the query that we actually submitted. It is completed, no errors, and this is what our data actually looks like. So we have an array of objects. The first one is a customer object with an ID right here, the tags that we've got for that customer. And then we've got, oh, okay, this is interesting. We've got a second customer record here and a third customer record here. Okay, so what we're seeing is, oh, okay, I'm sorry. This is all representing an order node itself, because that was the nature of our query here. We looked at order nodes and what came back from them. So this, I wonder what the right way to do this is. So what we could do is, here's what I'm thinking about. We've duplicated this data 3 times, and that's fine when we're dealing with like tens of customers or hundreds or even thousands of customers. But when we start dealing with hundreds of thousands of orders or more, this is going to be a lot of duplicated data. So I actually don't want to use this structure at all. Even though this is the GraphQL query that we started with our original task, it's not appropriate for bulk consumption of data. So instead of this, what I'm going to do is take a look at all of our customers. I'm going to look at, oh, here. Command Enter. There we go. Getting it back. We're going to look at all of their IDs. We're going to look at their tags. And then we're going to look at their orders. And we're going to look at their order publication name. Just like that. Now this allows me to make sure that each customer only appears in the bulk operation payload once, and each order publication name only appears in the payload from bulk operation once. This way we're not unnecessarily duplicating data. Publication name, great. We have the bare minimum necessary in order to achieve what we need to achieve. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to bring this back over to our task. Scroll back down here. Replace this query with, with this. Remove the first arguments because those are not necessary at all. Okay, great. So let's save. Let's go back to our task from earlier. Retry it. Oh, you know what? That's not going to make any sense because we're retrying a bulk operation event with a bulk operation data that came back from earlier. That doesn't make any sense at all. So we're just going to hit run task again and start from scratch. Okay, we ship that off. So in 60 seconds, we will discover what the contents of this actually is. But we know it's going to look something like, well, we know it's going to be an array of objects. So what can I show you that is useful for the next 42 seconds? Our documentation center is fantastic. You can read more about bulk operations and other things here. I'm actually not going to worry too much about what happens in the next 30. So feel free to skip ahead if you are bored. Thanks for being with me so far. We've got 18 seconds, 17. Wherever you are in the world, I hope you're having a phenomenal day and that you are imbuing the world with more good as a function of what you are doing with your time. It's my goal with Mechanic, and I hope that it inspires you to do anything like that with your own work. World needs more good. All right, any second here, we're going to see a task come back, but it's not going to perform any actions. There we go, cool. Bulk operation. We have 8 objects this time. This is still pending. Sometimes that can take a second. Mechanic is very good at auto-scaling in the background, making sure that our capacity is dynamically adjusted based on whatever load the platform is experiencing at the time. But that does mean that runtime can sometimes take a couple seconds to actually begin. So here are our objects that come back. We have a single customer right here with their current tags. And then we've got a bunch of objects that look kind of naked because they didn't come with any IDs, because they didn't request any IDs. But here's our null publication, and here's a parent ID. So the parent ID tells me that this thing right here belongs to this customer because their IDs, well, this ID matches this parent ID. This is great, except that as I'm thinking ahead to how this task will work, I want a way to quickly filter through all these objects and just pull out the orders. Is that what I want? So where this is going, where that was going until I thought otherwise, is that one of the things you can do with bulk operations or any GraphQL query is throw in a type name selector field, and this tells you exactly what kind of node you're receiving. In the context of a normal GraphQL query, this isn't useful at all. Like I know that this is an order node because it's a node in the series of edges that came from the orders selector field thing. In a bulk operation, though, that can be very useful because if you can imagine, if there's a type name field here that said order or customer, it'd be very easy to identify what was going on here. Having said that, because I'm the one who owns this task, what I can say is that well, here, let me show you by example. Where tags, you know what? No, I was going to show you a way around this, but I really like the type name system. So what I really want to do is say where type name is customer, great, here are my orders, fantastic. And then what I'm going to want to do is say for customer in customers, cool. And I'm going to want to say assign customer orders equals bulk operation.objects where parent ID is the customer.id. Here's where type name is probably optional because all I need to do is take a look at the parent ID with the knowledge that the only things coming back with a parent ID relating to a customer are orders because, again, I own this query. I've lost that sentence halfway through, but you can see how this would work. For the sake of completeness, though, I'm gonna do this. This is just going to result in a system that's more pleasant to read. This notation right here is sane because, again, I own the task, but it's a little bit weird to just say, great, look at all the objects in the bulk operation, anything with a parent ID of this customer, that's an order that we're interested in. This only makes sense because I'm holding this code in my head at the same time. This doesn't make sense otherwise because if I had forgotten about that query, who knows what other objects are in here. But if I use this to begin with, and then I say I'm only looking at orders, Now we have a chunk of code that makes complete sense, even though I'm holding only this part in my personal human brain memory. So in order to make this work, type name, I am going to select type name as well here. Type name, fantastic. And because I am quite confident in how this has worked so far, I'm going to say log customer ID, customer orders. Great. Save, run. Okay, cool. So while that's executing for the next minute, I'm going to click this, head back down here. Actually, let's give ourselves some more room. So I know that, what do I know? Thinking ahead, I know that what I'm going to want to do is collect all of the sales channel names, aka publication names, that relate to this customer's orders. So I'm going to say publication names, and let's keep our scoping here. Assign customer publications names equals customer orders. We're going to map for the publication field, and we're going to map for the name. And that is going to select for us, the publication, the publication and then the name. So what we should end up with is an array of strings that represent all the publications that were relevant for this particular customer. I'll save this, and it's been 60 seconds, so this should have come back. We're gonna have to go that way. User triggered the task. Oh, it hasn't come back yet. Oh, there it is. Cool. Fantastic. And that's chilling out. We'll give it 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Am I lucky? Not quite. If this is ever taking a second and you're curious, you can take a look at this bulk operation data. This is everything Mechanic knows about the bulk operation. And you can actually take a look at this chunk of JSON lines yourself. This is the URL where all the data actually lives, where Shopify temporarily stashes it after the bulk operation is complete. So that's all available to you. You don't need to wait for Mechanic to parse it. You'll want to, ultimately, but still. All right, so here's what's come back. We've got our customer object here. We've got our order object. This already makes me feel happy because it's easy for me to see what the exact nature of this data is. It's in a very different format than your normal GraphQL response, but this feels good to me. This looks like something that I can easily make sense of. Okay, awesome. So what I'm going to do actually while I'm in here is copy this. I've got a customer, I've got an order. I'm grabbing one that actually has a publication name. I'm copying this because I want to do exactly the same thing as we did with our first scenario up here, where we construct stub data that represents the data that we would have, that we'll actually get back when it comes time to showtime. So if we head down here to the end of this task, I'm going to say if event.preview, here we can kill that log statement. If event.preview capture bulk operation, here let's continue to match case here. Bulk operation JSON, and what does this actually look like? Looks like objects, that. Cool. I'll pull that one out because I don't care about it. And we'll replace these with IDs that clearly look like test data instead of an invitation to investigate someone else's data. And we'll say that, again, if event preview. Great. So now we have, in preview mode, a chunk of data that is representative of what we're actually going to be doing. So we've got that. If I were to start doing some echoes up in here, actually here, let's do this. Customer ID, names, that's fine. If we were to close this and I scroll down here, we see a preview action that contains the customer ID and an online store name. Now the nice thing about doing stub data in this way is that it allows us to test it and massage it to prove to ourselves that this actually works down here. For example, if I were to add another order, great, online store, it was correctly deduped. I only have one thing coming up here. If I were to choose something different, awesome, it's correctly collecting everything. What if I have an order that has no publication? Okay, now I've got a null here. I don't remember if Liquid has a compact filter. I feel like it does. Yeah, it does. Cool. Removes any null values from an array. So what we can do here is say, not only do I want unique values, but I also want a compact value set. No nils. All right, fantastic. So now we've proved to ourselves that regardless of the name or even the presence of the publication, we're only going to get a list here that contains unique values that are not null. So I can remove all of these. And now we can go with the business of deciding what tags we actually want to add for this customer. So we can say assign tags to add equals array. If you've never seen this before, this is one of the several things that Mechanic adds to standard Liquid. This makes programming in Liquid very pleasant, honestly. So assign tags to add is the array. Now what we need to do is loop through all these names. So for name in this. And then we need to take a look at our keyval. Yeah, this thing right here. Great. I just copied that. You can't see my keystrokes, but I did. So we need to assign tag equals this, and that's fine. Okay, and now we can say if tag is not blank. Here, let's do this. Unless, I was trying to think of the most concise way to say this, but while I could do this with a single unless statement, for example, unless tag is blank or customer.tags contains tag, that's pretty readable. The other way to do this would be something like if tag equals blank, continue. I'm being sloppy about indentation because I'm going to delete this in a second. Here. Or customer.tags contains tag, continue. And if I could do it that way. Actually I like that better. Okay, assign tags to add. Great. So now we have a for loop that goes through all the customer publication names, looks up a tag that corresponds to each publication name. If it's blank or if it's already used by the customer, we skip it. Otherwise, we add it to our tags to add array. And now, if I throw this on the end of our echo, I should see, okay, tags to add is empty because, as I recall, we are already tagged online store. If I remove this thing, all right, great. We see the online store is now on the list. And let's prove it to ourselves that this works with multiple things. We've got a channel name here called FSA, which I'll keep because why not? If this one is tagged FSA, we see that, excellent. We see that we are only adding the tag ASDF and not the tag online store because customer already has that one. Perfect. I'm also interested in the case in which there are no tags to add. Okay, cool. Well, that statement right here really only makes sense if I'm actually talking about my mutation. So what I was going to say is, what we need to worry about is whether or not there are actually any tags to add. So if tags to add is not empty, then we actually go about the business of executing our action. So right now there are no preview actions because as far as our test data is concerned, there are no tags to add. But if I were to remove these things from our stub data, we now have tags to add, we're now executing our action. So I'm going to remove this now that we've proved what I wanted to prove. We need to make sure that we're not using a hard-coded value here. We want to make sure that we are instead doing what we did earlier, using stub data that reflects the merchant's configuration. Go back down here. Name online store, fantastic. And now we can actually perform our mutation for tagging. So here's this. I'll replace our, actually, here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna say, so what I'm thinking about right now is test mode. Something that I've been building into most of my tasks lately has been this notion of test mode, which allows merchants or developers or anybody to say, it enables people to enable test mode so as to executize the task non-destructively. So right now, what I've just created is a brand new test mode such that if it's enabled, we get an echo statement, and if it's disabled, I get a tagging operation. This needs to be updated. We are now looking at the customer ID, and we are looking at tags to add plural. So here's customer ID, here are tags to add. Great. But if test mode is enabled, this thing will occur non-destructively, and now I've got this going on here. Now, if I've got a couple thousand customers, this is going to generate a couple thousand action statements, so this is actually not the way I'm going to handle this. Instead of all this, I'm going to say unless and end unless, and this will make sense in a second. What I'm going to do is say if event dot, nope, if options dot test mode we're going to build up an array of summaries and then echo them once at the very end. And then at the end of this for loop, we'll say something like this: action echo summaries. Okay. So what will we do here? We'll say that if text add is not empty, and if here, I will construct a quick summary, assign summary equals hash, and then we'll assign a summary with all this data here. Assign summary customer ID equals customer ID, assign summary customer publication names, and then that will be, yep, that same array from before. And then we'll also say that the tags to add is so tags to add. And then finally, we'll throw it into our array of summaries. Okay. So now, at the very end, we're echoing summaries. We're going to say, when a bulk operation finishes, yep, okay, here's a summary with customer ID, the name, tags to add. Let's be consistent about our namespace in here. Great. If I were to uncheck this, we would see that we actually generate a mutation instead. Oh, an empty echo statement. Where did that come from? Oh, okay, because this should only be executed if we are not in test mode. Or no, if we are. Options.test mode, boolean. Great. I think that should do it. So let's execute this for real. I'm content with this code here and how we've been testing it continuously throughout here. I'm content to run this without test mode, so let's hide this, leave test mode off, hit run task. This will actually probably do nothing because our customer is already tagged with the online store task. I've got a minute to untag it, so let's actually go in here, remove that tag, save. Yeah, sweet. So shortly we will see our final result. Feel free to skip ahead for the next 40 seconds or so. I'm gonna wait and leave this open. By the way, I was doing a lot of unchecking this. This setting, the defaults for this, are available over in your mechanic settings right here. you can uncheck this, hide events that did nothing, which I'm not going to right now, but you could save that setting, and you would find that all of your recent activity lists are now showing you events that did nothing. So that's useful. All right, in just a second, we'll see this. Feel free to scrub ahead by 10 seconds. Bum, 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 bum. Bum, bum. 2 minutes ago. Oh. Bulk operation finished. Oh, you know why? It's because so this bulk operation completed almost instantly. Literally it took less than 10 seconds. So by the time this bulk operation finished, it didn't, there was nothing for it to actually do because, sorry, I'm explaining this poorly. By the time this bulk operation finished, I'm sorry for a third time. This bulk operation finished, and I still hadn't gotten around to actually removing that tag from the customer, which means that by the time this task actually ran, it was using data from before the tag was removed, which means that there was nothing for the task to actually do when it came time to actually do something. I'm rambling. So now we're going to run this one more time with a customer that definitely does not have any tags. And we're going to wait for 40 more seconds, and I'm going to do something useful with your time. And that is going to be talking about our choice of help desk software. So we have just switched Mechanic, and we'll be switching over Locksmith soon, to Help Scout from Intercom. We've been using Intercom for a long time, years, and while it's a good tool, it's largely moved into a position of being a sales tool. Intercom's feature set appears to increasingly be about winning customers and making them feel as comfortable as possible once they're here, so as to make more valuable customers in the long term. My interpretation of that, I don't know. My goal is to make you as comfortable as possible here and to make you as effective as possible. I really deeply care about that. But something about Intercom's vibe just has begun to feel salesy, and I'm 0% interested in separating you from your money and trying to maximize that function. I want to create something valuable that you can use and that you actually want to pay for. And I only ever want to charge you what feels good, which is why our pricing policy is what it is. But anyway, we switched to Help Scout. Their pricing model is much more in line with how we actually work. And their vibe as a company appears to be more about radically helping customers rather than winning customers. And that just feels better for us. So, soapbox concluded. We've arrived here just in time to see that our customer has indeed been tagged online store. And we had the happy opportunity just before this to discover that this task correctly does nothing if the customer is already tagged. So we've proved all that I need to prove. Our customer tagging task is now complete. We now have proved for certain, using stub data within our task code itself, that we correctly perform tagging if it's even appropriate. And we do that based on order creation, dynamically, responsively, and we also proved that it works when we actually run it via bulk operation on demand. And that's it. This took just less than an hour. This would have been faster if I wasn't actually narrating my process. But thanks for being here for it. If you have any questions, use this wonderful little Help Scout thing here, or shoot me a message. You have my email address because you've been watching me code with it. I'm glad you're here. Thanks for being here. I appreciate you. Have a fantastic day. Cheers. Quick addendum. I realized that test mode did not get extended to when the order is created. So very quickly, I'm going to pop up here and say else if options.testMode boolean else, and then I'm going to echo out something that resembles what we've got down here with customer ID, publication names, and tag to add. I'm going to say action echo customer ID. What's our customer ID? Result.data.word.customer.id. Publication name. Just like that. And proven right here. We've got a customer ID, publication name, tag to add. I disable that. And I still have this. What did I do wrong? Else, there it is. Else if. Quick typo. Okay, that's it. Test mode. No test mode. Addendum complete. Thanks for your time. Cheers.